From I Am Interchange, this is the Hatch podcast series.
It seems now more than ever that we have found ourselves on the cusp of monumental worldwide change. Whether we consider the environment, politics, infrastructure, health, economics, or inequities across a broad swath of social constructs, the consensus is clear and urgent. All is not as it should be. The United Nations, a consortium of 193 member states from around the globe, agrees. In 2015, the UN unanimously adopted the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. These goals call for urgent action and global partnership to secure peace and prosperity for people and the planet, now and into the future.
In alignment with the SDGs, Hatch, a curated network of artists, activists, and entrepreneurs working together to accelerate positive global change, has partnered with I Am Interchange to fuse adventure journalism with experiential design labs to develop innovative solutions to complex global challenges. Few people are untouched by the humble power of music. When we're in the depths of grief or the quietude of midwinter blues, Little Soothes provides the same solitary comfort and seeness as concisely as Nina Simone's throaty crooning or Yo-Yo Ma's haunting cello suites. We employ music to help us focus, to energize movement, to coax us to sleep. A good soundtrack, one that augments rather than detracts, is implicit to a successful film, offering an artistic interpretation of both the director's vision and the screenwriter's story. Playlists define parties, whether intimate dinner gatherings or all-night raves, with intentionality and grace, coaxing community through a nuanced alchemy of harmony, dissonance, rhythm, and frissions of indefinable energy. Music is everywhere. In the mundane trappings of daily life, the wild grace of nature, the amalgamation of creativity and emotion in art. I'm Tate Chamberlin, and in this interview, I host esteemed public speaker, musician, and social activist, Jurgis Didziulis, as we talk about his recent work at the United Nations COP27 in Sharm El-Sheikh, Egypt, the windy roads intrinsic to seeking self and cultivating community, and the harmony in and within it all. We're in Egypt. Join us, won't you? What kind of toys did you have growing up?
What kind of toys did I have growing up? I grew up in the States, so I had very much American toys, or American toys were the standard. And because I grew up in a mixed household, my father is ethnically or culturally Lithuanian, though he was born in Colombia, a son of World War II refugees. My mother's Colombian, and we lived since the age of 3 till 10. We lived in Philadelphia, and so it was very curious because the local Colombian toys were absolute shite, and it was like, yeah, and that was kind of like the mark of wow, America's so awesome. Why? Because they have great chocolate, awesome sweets, and they have amazing toys. So I did the usual, but I think if anything stuck fondly, it must have been Lego, because I played with Lego well into my teens.
Yeah, I love Legos.
Well over their expiration date.
Was there a theme of Legos that you preferred?
I loved building my own stuff.
Okay, so you didn't have like castle or space?
Yeah, we did. The pirates, the space, the castle, Lego City. A little bit of the Technics at some point, but what I really loved was just kind of like saying, oh, let's design something. And a lot of it was quite standard, like, well, I can create a plane without a manual, like something you saw from a movie or something like that. I think those were more my most prized creations. And also I loved making moon bases.
Moon bases. That's so relevant to today.
Yeah, it is. And it's funny because it's so like the aesthetics would lead forward, and then at some point you're like, oh, they need a bathroom. What are they going to eat, or like where are they going to sleep? And it's funny because those considerations don't come to play. It's like, no, these angles are really cool, and it's like, no, this is awesome because this is like And you're even thinking about air. It's like, no, this hole here is actually I don't know, magnetic force field which keeps the air in. And so you're going through all these considerations as a child, like what makes sense. I was very fond of it, and I think the curious thing is because it allowed a lot of engineering, exploration of what you believe a nice place to be. Like, oh, this is the house I'd love to live in, And it's funny that we find ourselves in a point where we're going back to these explorations again, and the last things you think about are water, food. You know what I mean? Like,
I was gonna ask, what are your thoughts on building a moon base today?
Man, it's curious because I've kind of over the past year really ventured into the realm of dreams, and there are things that we believe have a physical existence, but they also have so many collapsible dimensions to them. So I mean, somebody can say, can you fly? Like, can you imagine flying like an eagle? And I think that our power of imagination is such that we could do all these kinds of amazing, don't call it time travel, don't call it astral projection, but you could imagine it so vividly, so beautifully, that it would be on par with the most amazing IMAX theater experience. And so this ability to create things from within, like I can imagine a base on the moon, but then you can imagine communing with certain entities on the moon. And that's why I think that, for example, indigenous cosmology is so amazing, because they'll say, no, the rock is alive, no, the water is alive. And so for me, this idea of like going to the moon with rockets is tremendously inefficient. You follow what I'm saying?
Doesn't it seem like it? Yeah.
It's like, I was like, why would you go if you can like almost like imagine it, right? And I'm not saying it's not great. We can go into space and do all these amazing things, or traverse continents, but I've met people who can be present in other realities through very deep meditation or through ancestral practices. And maybe this is a bit woo, me bringing it up in like a podcast like this, but I'm more fascinated with that. I'm more fascinated to traveling to the moon, to Jupiter, to other parts of our galaxy, in another way rather than physically.
Yeah, and resourcefully also. We're spending all this time and money on it rather than spending money on Earth.
I mean,
fixing it.
It's even the curious thing about money is it's become a pivotal part of our paradigm. How we measure value, right? So you got this thing where it's like we're measuring value, and this is the only way that we can operate. And of course, it allows us to organize. And according to economic theory, it's the best distribution of resources. We're optimizing. But then you think about all the amount of things we can't do, which makes so much sense, and because they don't make economic value. And so again, it's like even the Apollo missions, there was a lot of pushback people don't remember back in the day, where people was like, well, you could feed all of the poor people in America twice or three times instead of going to the moon. And so I think there's this kind of curious thing about, and I romanticize it a bit, returning to the Legos, the aesthetics, the rockets, all these rockets had tons of guns. Like first thing on the rockets were guns, Lots of, and big boosters so you could go really fast. And I kind of think a little bit, it's like, it's funny, it's like I never thought about this, but right now in conversation, it's just like, wow, amazing how in terms of evolution you start thinking of different things. It's like, oh, let's make an orgy dome as well, or let's make a
Si, por favor.
We need different things, not just guns on the moon base.
We need to be happy. This is the Hatch podcast. We've got Jurgis, and we're in an interesting place, Sharm El-Sheikh, Egypt, at COP27. We were just with Hatch Experience on the Nile, exploring with a bunch of Hatchers through the masculine and feminine, as well as all of the world-changing ideas that they bring. And you really bring great community-building piece to it through music. And now we're sitting in here in a hotel room talking about it. Walk me through your childhood. Were there any pivotal moments that just stuck with you throughout life about your childhood that taught you lessons?
Well, my childhood was interesting. I would say it was actually very unique in the sense that I was brought up to be a perfect outsider. And I never belonged. And till now, I feel I never really truly belong to anything. And I'd much rather inhabit the periphery of a community than be at its core. I don't know why. And it's like even when I had a very famous rock group in Lithuania, and we had a beautiful band with my wife later on, and I always struggled with the idea of putting myself at the center and like holding space for a community. I wasn't good at it. I was much better at kind of like social commentary, kind of like guiding, I don't know, like, but just being at the periphery. And that was very much informed by the fact that I was a Colombian Lithuanian kid, and when I came to consciousness, child consciousness, I was living in the United States. So I was the weirdest fucker in class, but not black, not terribly Hispanic. You know, my family was affluent, but it was strange, and it was a private school, and it was like, who's this weirdo? Nobody could peg me, you know.
It came off as a little more exotic than
like exotic, but like we don't know. Is this kid a spick or what, or like, you know? Because even you know, I'm using derogatory terms, but they were very much used when I was a child. You know, whether like you felt the aggression
towards you.
Yeah, like, or you know, lots of Jewish kids, and you're the one who's not circumcised. You know, and it was a bit sometimes weird, and I didn't know because I didn't have a full immersion into Colombian culture, Lithuanian culture. And then I go back to Colombia at the age of 10, and I feel more American than I do Colombian. And
after you've been immersed in American culture,
yeah,
you come back.
And I missed it. And I remember leaving, and I was like, oh, the toys, the music, you know, the banter, you know, the way you interact with other human beings.
So you became an outsider again.
An outsider again. And then we went to a private school, and my parents were like, you're just becoming a little gringo. You know, we need to put you in a Colombian school. And thank God they did. And so again, I was an outsider. At the age of 20, I moved to Lithuania. And I feel that I'm a Lithuanian, my Lithuanian name, last name, you know. And it's interesting because the name Jurgis Didziulis, it means Jurgis the Great. It's like, Didziulis means like big and great and grand. So it's like you get to Lithuania and say, so what's your name? Jurgis Didziulis. It's like, oh, that's a powerful name.
That's a great name.
But you're still a Colombian, you know? No one treats you as a local, as a Lithuanian. So always this feeling that learning how to navigate not belonging. I think that's also why probably community resonates with me. Rainbow gatherings, Burning Man, Hatch. And the only thing is that I've kind of come such a long way that I understood that it's just a key part of our human, like an inbuilt kind of like human programming feature, that we can create these communities quite sporadically, quite spontaneously, effortlessly. So that makes me a believer in anarchy, not in the sense that, because I studied political science, because I was just curious. And so anarchy sounds like very much a reactionary thing to capitalism or to communism, or you know, in its origins. But I start thinking of anarchy as like a space where there is no government. Like right now we're in a room, we're not ruled by law, we're ruled by humanity and common sense.
In this room, in
this moment, you know, there's rules and rules everywhere. And I think that the role of a nation state ruling your morality, and especially now our vision, is overplayed. It's overplayed. I think that there have been times in humanity where it's beautiful, we all come together. And like Egypt is a good example of that, where we are right now, where it's like in the 50s, 60s, you know, like, you know, people try to move beyond a traditional Arab mindset. And we saw that in the Middle East. I also relate to that because in Colombia we had something similar. You see a lot of the similar architecture, like the 50s and 60s, when these places were booming, and there was this kind of like, oh, no, now we're something else. We're this new synthetic culture, like this new Egypt, right? That's very true for Turkey and many. The United States is also a very good example of these kinds of like nation states that evolved simply because people came together and said, hey, we no longer have to be just this or just that. We can create something new.
Yeah, it's interesting. We were just on our walk back from the Indigenous Caucus at COP27, and we were looking at all of the, basically it's just kind of a big resort town that has lost some of its old cultures. So you're saying that all the cultures through that time period just kind of let go of the past and their culture to come up with, they seem like they're all similar all over the world, just like the strip mall vibe.
Well, right now it's so like we're in a cheap hotel room, right? But we could be in Latin America, we could be in Panama, we could be, right. You know, it's like the main furniture. It's like I'm in the late 90s, or maybe the early 90s.
Something like that, yeah. With a mini bar. And a broken refrigerator.
Exactly. You know, so it's not so much a cultural piece that is informing the space. It's more what the economic reality and what the design reality and what the architecture was like at a given moment in time. And I love it. Like, we've been staying in really interesting hotels. I prefer staying in like old rundown hotels because you actually time travel in a sense, you know? Oh, so this is the way people felt in the 50s. Funnily enough, I feel I connect with my grandfather and his aesthetic this is a good place to smoke a cigarette and have a whiskey. It's perfect, like designed for that, you know?
Totally. Yeah. I was actually just thinking of, like, I keep a journal when I travel, and I was just thinking of future people in my family maybe stumbling on it someday and having access to my perspective at the time, like where your grandfather smoked a cigarette.
I even, like, speaking of cigarettes, the fact that people still smoke here everywhere. Like in a hotel lobby. And it's like, it transports you back somewhere else.
Yeah, I came, I don't smoke, and every time I'm in Egypt, like the last time I became a smoker, because everybody does, and I was like, should I bring cigarettes on this trip? And I was like, no, I'm not going to smoke. And then all of a sudden I was like back into it.
Yeah.
Culturally significant. I mean, it kind of ties community together in some ways.
Oh, completely, because it's a ritual.
Yeah.
It's a ritual. I'm highly obsessed with this. I mean, this theme of how there are certain rituals that bring people together. Like, mostly I work through the framework of music, but funnily enough, I studied political science, which kind of at least taught me that it's not in the normative or descriptive realms that we engineer society. And a friend of mine has a really beautiful term. She calls it, she makes a difference between institutionality and exstitutionality. So an institution is something that grows out of like assimilation, copying, imitating, resonating values. Like where you see something, you're like, oh, I love that. Like, I love your shirt. And so I start wearing the shirt. And it's not like we agreed upon it. It just happened. It's like, it's like a tribal behavior. And she says it's very much like the way plants grow. That there's so much trust in the system that there's no agreement between them. Just everybody knows what they're supposed to do. And I think at least like in this context, I really find that we've forgotten that we engineer society by rewriting culture, collective culture, every minute. And so taking out a cigarette is it like an embodiment of our values of where we are. Of like, oh, we're going to take a break. Hey, I'm going to take a break together with you. A Romanian friend of mine said something really funny. He says, I can't imagine how working people measure time if it's not in cups of coffee and cigarettes. But that says a lot about, hustling culture, right?
You were talking about how people like a shirt and then look at a shirt. And I've hosted debates around whether it's cultural exchange or appropriation. And I have this long-lasting question on whether America, the United States, has a culture. Because it's a very young country and everyone gets accused of appropriating cultures. But is that because they don't have a culture to follow? It's just like many cultures.
That's a great question. I would think that it has a lot to do with the fact that again, the nation, the idea is synthetic. It's synthetic. It's different people coming together, and it was engineered so to be inclusive. Even though we have issues with race in America, well, you have issues with race in America and stuff like that. But it's meant to be inclusive. It's supposed to absorb and assimilate people. I studied this a little bit because for me the whole diaspora thing is super interesting. But the issue being mostly with the States is that there are guidelines. There's ways you do it. Like think about like when you went to school with like the first one with a certain kind of sneakers or T-shirt. How did you feel? Especially when you got recognition and people were looking at you. And then how did it feel when other kids started wearing it? And what happened when the like uncool kids started wearing it? So there's what you have is like as a pattern of society building, but the inputs change constantly. And the problem with cultural appropriation mostly, I think, is like if you are imitating me, you're validating me in a way. But colonialism, and this is not exclusive to American colonialism, it has been so violent in many places that then when they start extracting and appropriating culture, people feel uncomfortable like that. Like imagine if the reason why many Latin Americans is like, you're wearing our bags or you're wearing, our knit, these mean something to us, and you just think they're beautiful, and you called us stupid for the past 100 years and oppressed us, and now you're wearing it. I mean, I'd understand how that feels, and I wouldn't go into like a deep analysis of it, but just understanding what the human implications are, just like it was in the 8th grade when the uncoolest kid in school started wearing the cool sneakers, and everyone's like, what the fuck's going on?
Yeah, maybe the intention behind it.
Yeah, I believe I'm very much disowning the normative and again, the institutional frameworks. Like people say, let's write it up, let's do the governance for this. And I'm like, no, let's not. Let's just flow. And then let's try and describe it. And then let's try and see why this works. And it's very much like playing music. I for example, I can't read notes. I can read chords, but I can't read notes, notation. It's like you put something in front of me and I'll struggle, right? Eventually I might crack it, but I don't speak that language.
So you just listen and practice?
I'm listening and practicing. I don't go there. It's like I don't need to know that, oh, a fourth sounds really nice before, I like after a first, and then if you combine that with, I don't know, a fifth or a seventh, well, that sounds great. I've discovered many of these things on my own, just playing. But some of the most beautiful music, especially if we talk about, like, think about it, man. We've had the written word for 6,000 years, max, maybe, you know, it's talking about Sumerian Empire. We've had oral traditions for as long as we've walked the earth, hundreds of thousands of years. Like, and even pre-humans, and even if we look at birds and other species, the way they communicate, and they enter this flow, you know, by communicating, like, non-verbally. It's like, like one of the things I tell people is like, we don't need such complex concepts and words. I can communicate beautiful emotions just by going, ah, and oh, and ooh, and
Totally. I understand all of those.
Exactly. They're in your core programming.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the thing that I feel is that we've entered this time. So it's like, describe it. I like, let's make the framework first, the institutional governance framework first, and then let's fill it. Whereas I'm just more like, no, does that feel right? I was like, does that feel right? Why did it not feel right? Like, let's sit here for a moment, but then let's figure out how we move on. And I think that is rooted very much in emotional intelligence. And what I find unfortunate is when we return to emotional intelligence now as a more, say, maybe possibly a more evolved species, but we're still thinking of it through the mind. You know, it's like, oh, how to make friends and influence people. You know, it's like, let's read a book, or like let's do some media training and make you charismatic. It's like,
take improv lessons.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but improv is probably the right way because it's play. And play is super important. It's a non-fatal simulation.
Yeah,
which is how we all learn. Where there's excitement, but there's no deep consequences. So this is kind of like an approach which I've been obsessed with, and particularly when it comes to music, because I think music describes these things very beautifully. Like a chord it's physics, which works, and we hear it and we perceive it and say, that's beautiful. I mean, think about it. Harmony, the definition of harmony is a beautiful relationship. In some cases between two notes, in some cases between two people. And you could write a book about it. But if you know, it's like, no, we're aspiring to higher harmony. We know what it feels like. We know what it sounds like.
Yeah.
To flow with it, you know?
Not only do you have a beautiful mind, you do play beautiful music. I was curious how you fell in love with music.
I think it was Axl Rose.
Axl Rose? Yeah,
man. And it's like, I'm a bit embarrassed. It's like I always loved music as a child. Especially I remember, again, it was like Awakening in the United States. It's like the radio station we'd listen to on the way to school. And it was the thing that made me cry when we left the States.
Not having access to the music. This was in 1990, 91, something like that. Like, there was no internet. You know? And so the radio stations didn't exist
They didn't exist. And it was the programming. It was like, I didn't know it was Lionel Richie, or I didn't know it was, I don't know, Hall & Oates that was playing on the radio. You know, I didn't know. It was just like, it was like what my parents were listening to, and I became super attached to it. Yeah,
you would have had to bring a record or like a whole tape assortment,
a mixtape, right? Like, to get that, it made me. I cried. I literally cried because I was missing the music. Ironically enough, when I was 7, I got my first Walkman, and
that's a tape player. No, it's a disc player.
It's a tape player.
Tape player.
You don't know what a Walkman is? Oh man, tape. Oh.
I got it first.
Dude, a big, bulky, yellow tape player.
Yeah.
With earphones. And it was the coolest thing. For me, it was like my first act of emancipation as a human being, because I could listen to what I wanted and to start curating my music. Like, this is what I'm going to listen to. But I remember it was like, my first tapes were the Beatles, like an old mixtape my mother had. And then it was Def Leppard, and it was Guns N' Roses, and it was Bon Jovi.
Nice.
It was strange because
straight out of the 80s.
Straight out of the 80s, man. Straight out of the 80s. Like, and it's funny because I sometimes return to those first tapes. And like, initially for me, what was amazing is like, just you could immerse, you could become like Guns N' Roses just listening to it. Like, you felt the raw emotion. It would excite me. I remember maybe getting my first erections as a child, like listening to the music. I was like, what am I feeling? What is this? And then obviously you had the visual content, you know, MTV was out at that. And then for me, it was just like kind of thinking, it's like, this music can like completely change the tapestry of reality. It's like, here are my parents in suburban life with me, and there are these people like drinking some, I don't know, some stuff out of a bottle, smoking something, putting something in their mouth which is burning, and they're moving their hips, and there are all these beautiful ladies going, wow, and I'm like, wow.
I'm drawn to that.
Yeah, I mean, my musical taste evolved quite quickly after that. But what really remained was the idea that you're really just immersing yourself in a subculture. Like Bob Marley is like, wow, and I really love to try to get into the psyche of the band.
Yeah. Did you talk to your parents about how it was affecting you?
No, my mother tried to take away the tapes at some point.
Oh, she did. Oh. She was one of the parents who were like, this is the devil's music.
She was concerned. And there was music that would scare me. Like, I remember in school, it was like, I couldn't do metal. It's like, no, it's too, like, I couldn't. It would scare me. And like certain types of hip hop I found to be too aggressive. Like, I couldn't listen to it. I'd find it distressing. And it's odd because around 15, 16, then you start really curating your taste. And it's like, I would say like my formative years were like about Pixies. I was deep into Sonic Youth, and Sonic Youth is an acquired taste. Like, you have to sit, like the way you have to learn to smoke and not enjoy it for a really long time, and then you go, oh,
now it hits.
That was
the so now we're moving into the 90s.
Now we're moving into the deep 90s, and everything that was kind of like popular. But at that point, everybody's like, oh, MTV sold out, and so the more dark, weird, and alternative you got, the more authentic you felt, the more of a sense of a tribe. It's like you would dream of finding another girl who listened to Sonic Youth. It's like, I remember like my first girlfriend, she was like, oh, I listen to Sonic Youth too. I'm like, it's like, you must be the only girl in Bogota, who likes this music. It's like, you're my love.
Did you propose to her?
I could have at that moment. I was deeply in love.
We were talking about kind of impulsive love because you're a Scorpio.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I'm terribly romantic, and I love poetry, and it's I have to check that sometimes because I'll scare everybody away.
When did you start to play music?
I think it was in the States still. I had a bright red guitar, but I couldn't even play chords for a very long time, and it just left it there. I would come back to it every now and then. I was very good singer in school. I was in all the choirs, and they'd like, oh, here, you take the solo aria. I also did tons of musicals as a child. And it was funny because even in the States, whereas again I was this kind of like this weird spick Lithuanian kid, which nobody could like, Judy's what is that? Like nobody knew. I really gained face in the community, or in that group of kids, and the parents especially, because once the parents say like, oh no, that kid's special, like you feel that you get another kind of acceptance. So the way I broke it was initially I started writing poetry, but then I got cast for musical theater. And there was this one moment, my father who's like daft as a doorbell, he has no artistic, he has feeling, but he's like, he's more of like a businessman, very dry kind of guy.
Maybe he's just like suppressed it. He's like a creative genius.
For sure. But there was this one moment where I was doing a performance. I was Puff the Magic Dragon, where they killed the dragon, something, like they killed the dragon. I was a dragon. And I sang so beautifully, and I died so beautifully that everybody was in tears.
You died so beautifully?
Yeah, and my mother and my father were like, oh, wow, what was that? Because it sent goosebumps to everybody. I was like, what is that? And everybody, I remember like the mothers of the kids who would look at me like a little piece of shit, all of a sudden were like, come to dinner. It was this...
that beautiful expression. And I've seen that actually resonate, because the places that... the doors that have opened because I'm just traveling with you, and you just like break out your guitar and start singing, just like open.
Yeah. But again, it's survival.
So that was your portal.
It was my portal. And it was all survival. And again, it became not only a sense of identity. And it's strange because like when I sang my songs, are like, oh, you can't sing a Sonic Youth song. That's probably the irony of it. You can't like, cool thing, that. And it's like, no. Like everybody would... It's like I'd go back into my obscurity. But when I sang something that other people liked, like musical theater, it was like, oh, so nice. And I think that's something I've been struggling with in my musical career since forever. It's like, am I serving other people? Am I giving them what they want or what I really want?
Yeah, reach into that tension a little more. Tell me more about that.
Oh man, that's an interesting one, because I think it's very much about you have to get esoteric a little bit, because it's about selflessness and understanding that we're one consciousness. So I do a lot of work with groups, and I got into works with groups and musical facilitation through public speaking. And in public speaking, again, it's very important to set certain cognitive boundaries. Like, always say something that is an absolute truth in the other person's mind. Always. Like, the sky is blue. Yes. Wine is lovely. Maybe a little bit of divergence, because not everybody loves wine. So, start with things that are absolute truth, and that way the resonance begins. It's like two notes that are like in sync, right?
Sure. You could frame it as like starting with sameness.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then you can kind of like, and so what we would do, especially with my first serious group in Lithuania, which was called Inculto, we started playing cover songs, Latin American cover songs, and everyone loved them. And so what we do is like, we're going to play a couple of really beautiful cover songs, then we're going to do one of ours. And then that song became a hit. So then that would become part of the repertoire that people knew. So one of the important things is that we look for in music is to recognize the familiar. One thing we don't realize is most people don't really have musical taste.
I see.
They're just familiar. It's like, I know that song.
Yeah, so you would play a song well that was a cover song, and then you would seed something that you had written that wasn't familiar with them to like get them into it.
Exactly. So they're like, oh, we know where this is coming from. This is familiar. Familiarity is so powerful. And when we talk about systems change or even marketing, it's like familiarity is like you can only start from familiarity, something you know, and reinventing the world from something that feels that you understand. People don't even realize that the main problem is not that someone won't like it, is they won't understand it.
I can see your first album cover, the songs we should have written.
But here's the curious thing, is that later on, or maybe like now, one of the things I look for universal codes in music, things that like you've heard before, because it's like, people try to patent songs or no, you don't patent songs, register songs.
Yeah.
And say, this is my intellectual property. It's like, how could that be your intellectual property? We've been playing that chord structure for thousands of years. That's just beautiful. That's just physics. It doesn't make sense. Like, if I started patenting words or combinations of words and saying, no, that's mine.
That's interesting. Yeah. Like someone trademarks a sentence. Would it be a trademark?
Well, you can trademark a slogan, but that's the whole thing. That we have a serious issue with intellectual property. Yeah. A serious issue.
And like, I've produced music festivals, and we used to always have to pay BMI, like per event, just in case someone played a cover song. Otherwise, we would be fined like $25,000.
Of course. Yeah, it really is terrible. Yeah. And even if you do just like a strange variation of the song, which I will often do, I'll put in some "Fly Me to the Moon." I'll put in some some Guantanamera, or something like something people know, just to hook them, and then you move on. So, am I liable or not? I mean, these are really interesting questions.
You're like the original Girl Talk, like the original analog DJ.
I don't know. I think we've been doing it for, again, we think that the standard is recorded music when it's not.
Yeah.
I really tell people, it's like, think about it. Less than 100 years of recorded music. Like, massively, what we have now, less than 50, maybe less than 30 years. Music used to exist only through invocation. If I start saying, when I remember when we used to, and immediately Bob Marley's in the space, and you hear the song within you. It's like your body knows. It's like, I know how the song has to go. And I think that is the most beautiful, because that's the essence of call and response in a tribal setting. Do you know our language? Do you know our songs? I will recognize you. It's like, it's like a password validation key. I send the what do you call it? The authentication key, and if you reply correctly, well, it means you're part of the tribe.
Just like you were saying a minute ago about the noises and sound of connection, like we all make that same language of sound.
Yeah, I mean, we are sound. We are sound. We are vibration. I mean, I speak of it openly now because it's not woo, it's science. It's like everything is vibration. And when you look at the patterns of vibration, there's so many beautiful similarities. Like, even if you look at phases of the moon, right? That's an oscillation, right? That's you can say that has frequency. The planets, the stars, atoms and everything. And if you look at chords, again, they have relationships. It's like if I play an octave, if this was perfectly in tune, you would understand this this is just truth, right? This is just an octave, a different kind of harmonic of this one chord. And so in truth, we are mimicking parts of the natural world in the music we listen to. And that's just on a say on the level of physics and vibration. But then there's, for example, biomimicry.
Like in nature?
Like in nature, like a lot of... I remember sitting at a farm in the countryside with my mother, and we're hearing a bird singing this, like, and that's Cielito Lindo. Ese lunar que tienes, cielito lindo.
Oh, we're singing the tune.
And we were wondering, is it that the bird learned our songs, or that we learned the songs from the birds? And after delving into this, I discovered it's symbiotic. Like,
it's all vibration.
It's all vibration. They like the song we were singing. We like the song they were singing, and so it perpetuates. And so like, for example, all the Colombian music, most of it, the genres which are nice in Colombia, which I think are great, like say like cumbia or vallenato, the melodic lines are all birdsong. And you pick them up and you hear them in nature and you say, oh, there it is. And so that's on a biological, I don't know if that would be biology, like our relationship with animals, what that would be.
Yeah, I mean biomimicry. I think that
I have no other way of describing it, but that's on that level. But on the level of physics as well, it's like playing certain sounds will be good for you, like especially if they resonate with you. Like I have a friend who does sound healing, and I thought he was full of shit for a long time. Like, oh, I'm going to take a tuning fork and put it here and there. But what he'd do is he'd put 2 tuning forks, right? So like it would be a relationship. So let me just demonstrate real quickly. So if I play, so this is a nice, this is a nice relationship. This is an octave. Now there's a dissonant relationship. For example, this one. That doesn't sound nice. This is something that it's dissonant. So he would take a series of ones which were first dissonant, and that would send your body the message to break bonds. Like it's like this feels dissonant. It's like when you hear music that just sounds like crap, and it makes you sick. So that's the thing. He will emit that, just like to break bonds within the body, and then say, all right, let's go to this one. Let's go to that one. And all of a sudden you bring a sense of harmony to the body. So imagine you're communicating to the body, so this is harmony. Like this is harmonious. You are right now experiencing harmony. And the body knows. Why? Because there's a lot of science behind it, like, how healing processes are accelerated through it, how our whole body changes, in the sense of our heartbeat, the neurochemical composition of our blood, just by putting these notes out there. Like, you play a chord like that, all of a sudden you're in a mood for love.
Play pain for me.
Pain.
Yeah. I felt both of those, yeah.
Yeah, isn't it curious? And like in Arab countries, they use more of these scales, these harmonic minor scales, dark, and they find it beautiful. I think it's also because they have much more pain than we do. In Latin America, for example, a lot of the music will be much more positive, like. Yeah, that's like, I want to dance, I want to feel good, right?
Yeah.
You change one note in that, it gets a little bit more serious. A little bit more mystical. It's so curious that you don't need to know music because you already know music. You don't need to learn it. You just need to experience it. You need to be aware of it. But that gets me into one interesting thing, which is the whole thing of initiation. That's why initiation is so important in everything. It's one of the things we've forgotten in education, is that you have all this information, all this data, but how do you make sense of it? Like, you probably would not have realized that, this is happy and that's sad, or why that is so, unless I told you.
Like with a name? Like
with a name, or like until someone starts pointing out architectural features in cities, you don't see them. Like the same way an indigenous person would come to a city and not understand that green means go and red means stop. They wouldn't know. Someone has to tell them. So these communal acts of initiation, where it's like we're showing you what this is about. And that's why those rituals are so important, because they have to be done with a sense of reverence, because if there's no reverence, then we don't know what's important. And if the person that's being initiated doesn't understand how important it is, then they won't treat it with importance, and they won't pass it down, and it will die after a couple of generations.
Did someone point that out to you? Like, your music makes me feel like this, like the vibrations you were giving out. How did you learn that the facilitations you were doing made an impact?
It was curious because at the age of 30, I had to stop playing music. We did Eurovision in 2010 with my band, and I couldn't do it anymore. So the economics didn't make sense, because I was like a small company owner. It's like 15 people, and I wasn't enjoying the music, and everyone had loans and everyone had kids, and it was like all of a sudden you're looking after a tribe and you're pimping out the thing that's most sacred to you. And what I found was really hurting me was that I wasn't playing music. We were rehearsing, we were producing, but we weren't playing music. We weren't enjoying each other's musicality. Like, we weren't having this intimate relationship. And so I stopped. I said, we're killing this band. I did an MBA in that period, and I got a consulting job for the European Union. And I allowed myself to re-explore music. Like, if I don't need to make money off of this, well then what can this be for me? And funnily enough, when I finished my MBA, and it was interesting because it was an executive MBA, and I usually wouldn't qualify for that kind of thing, but I had the political science degree, I'd done consulting work, and I had my own small company. So it's like, well, you do fit, you do check the boxes. And the curious thing is, like, when I did the MBA, I said, well, I can bring value through music differently. It's like, I don't have to package it as a record or putting people. I use the example of boxes. I don't have to put you in a box. I don't have to sell you a box. I don't have to box music. I can let it flow. And that was it's like, get off the stage and see how else you can serve this. And so I started doing public speaking with music, which was nice because, like, you can almost enter like a hypnotic state. So ladies and gentlemen, there are times when we feel, it's like it's a nice backdrop. You'd be surprised at how much stupid shit people say that sounds really smart because there's a nice backing track.
Totally. Well, not to say it was beautiful when Yara was presenting Hatch on the boats we were just on. You were doing that for him, and it created just the mood,
a vibe.
Yeah,
and
a vibe,
and
yeah.
It's beautiful. It's like nobody sells that, but in a conference, like, the people who get it, it's interesting because people who don't get it, you won't sell it to them ever. Once they get it, they're like, I want that. I want the music in the background, and I want somebody like when somebody finishes talking, you resolve. Okay, let's start again.
Especially if you don't have to rehearse it. If you can be good at improvising as a musician, you can just kind of be anywhere and just go with the flow, literally.
But that's it. It's not about structure. It's not about written notes. It's about speaking like we are in freeform. How boring life would be if, like, we only had scripted conversations. Mm-hmm. Like, you sat down here, back, and that was it. There would be no organic plasticity to it. There'd be no connection, no sincere connection. And when I realized that, there's something interesting that happened. Is like, I was putting people under a spell. So that's when people started, oh, you're like a musical magician, right? You bring joy to these spaces and you kind of affect us. But then when things got really interesting was when I realized that people enjoyed it much more when they were singing.
People enjoyed it when you got them to sing, like, with you?
Yeah, when they started singing, they would enjoy it more. To such a point where it's like, shut up, like, let us sing. And then I realized that there was this whole other kind of, like, dimension to this, which is like for me, the most beautiful arrangement I've ever heard is when human beings, which don't know what they're doing, all of a sudden come into harmony. When everybody finds their voice, and then it's so beautiful because everybody's eyes open, and they're like, what the fuck just happened?
I have rhythm. That was us. That beauty was us. Like, I work with companies and they're like, it's like, and they're like, oh no, we're just like serious programmers and like really serious people. And then it's like, dude, that note was like, it sounded like a choir. And they heard it and they're like, wow, how did we pull that off? How did that happen? And so that opened this whole other kind of like realm where I'm like, okay, well, how does social order, or the way that we interact with one another, how does that work with music? And I found that they're just perfect metaphors. through that facilitation, you bring up the amplified music has only been around for, I don't know, what, the last 60 years?
Yeah.
With that, you bring the group together and you're like, if I'm performing for you, then you just expect it. But if I bring you all along, take me through that.
Think of one thing. It really is about power, right? Like my capacity to deploy power. So if I'm hooked up to a PA and I have a microphone, I have the magic talking stick. And what occurs is that the social structure becomes a pyramid, where someone's on top projecting downwards, right? It's interesting. I mean, it's powerful technology. It's like you can. I mean, you've been to a techno rave. I mean, you've been to a concert. It's like, you know the power that has, and it's super stimulating. It's really lovely, but you're not exercising your musical faculties, because the way it used to be was that, like, for example, why I love rainbow gatherings where there's no amplified sound, is that the only way for a song to travel is if everyone sings. And the only way for everybody to sing is to learn the song and to listen to one another, looking for coherence. There's like, you look for notes, and it's really beautiful. It's like, that person sings well, that person sings well. I'm being guided by these human beings, they're being guided by other human beings. And you have this complex internet of sound that is recalibrating itself.
If you're a bad singer, you can kind of be coached by listening to the good ones.
Man, you can be coached, but it doesn't mean that you can't contribute. You can make music by going
totally,
or snapping or clapping or
whistling
or just. But this is the beauty of it. You find your place in the social tapestry. That's why it's so beautiful. That's why it's like, it's order. Like, but it's not like somebody told us. That's why I return. It's like, I believe in anarchy. This is because I believe in this form of social organization, rather than it's like, okay, now you're going to sing this and you're going to sing that, and now you're going to sing and you're going to do that, and now this and that. You can do some amazing things when you coordinate, but the basis of it is something much more. It's much more raw and human, and that's why, like, there's companies, like, the people who understand it, they appreciate it. And it was, again, an interesting conversation with my uncle and my father, both business people, and my dad's like, I don't fucking understand what you do. Like, who would buy this shit? You know, like, who, like, typical, like, who would buy this? And my uncle's going, he's like, BT, you don't need to understand. Like, if you understand that how important it is to really be in a coherent mindset with your colleagues and have transparency and communication and proper connection. If you value it, then you will understand the value of it. And so I'm blessed that it's like, I'm exploring this field where I don't know many people who do what I do. I know people who do things very differently and do amazing job also exploring that kind of thing. And so it's kind of cool, because I'm the only one in the market, but then there's no market, and so nobody knows. It's like, was it with you? We had halva this morning, remember? Mm-hmm. And it's like, until you try halva,
it was delicious.
Yeah, it was delicious. You'd never know. You're like, what?
I thought it was tofu.
You were looking at it and you're like, what's that? Like, poking at it, like, and until someone, like, again, initiation, look, this is halva. Sure. Then it's like, oh, yeah, good. Now I get it.
Have your parents come around to what you do?
Yeah. My mother's very supportive. My grandfather was very supportive. He wasn't supportive for a very long time, but now they're very supportive.
Did you bring it to them? I know through your social media, you play with your sons. What's it like doing this with your family? Has it connected you all more deeply, or helped them understand what you do?
Well, it's curious, because we've had kind of like coming of age moments in the family after my grandfather died, and we had some very beautiful musical moments. And it was funny because I describe my family as being emotionally atrophied. You know, they don't know how to express their feelings. They struggle. They really struggle, and it's gotten better. And I kind of feel that I've helped that, like, through human harmonization. And I don't mean not even through music, but like smiling more, hugging more, being a little bit more open and assertive with the expression of feelings. But during my grandfather's funerary services, there was a lot of music. And it was beautiful because, like, we sang My Way, and it's like, it was so funny. So we passed around the lyrics, and it was so lovely, like to see everybody crying, and like My Way was my grandfather's song, and we don't know the lyrics, but we're gonna make it happen, and it's like so beautiful. And then there was songs from when he was a Boy Scout, and how he used to boast that I sang some song, so everybody's singing the Boy Scout song that my grandfather used to tell him about. And it was these moments of, like, again, ritual and reverence. This is important. And we're making it important. We're giving it importance. That's what makes it so special. So we had that, and I'm happy we could do that. There is, like, a recognition. The thing with music is it's also fleeting. Like, I'll play something for you and I'll take you to cloud 9, or we'll take each other to cloud 9. And then the next day you're like, it's like almost like a casual lover. Go like, wow. And then you still have to acknowledge it. You have to integrate it somehow. That's a tricky one.
Yeah, that's so true. The last time when I was scouting this trip with Hatch in May, Alejandro, who you met, I think it was maybe the second to last night or the last night, last May. And he was just playing this beautiful Spanish music that just brought me to tears, and it just flowed. And I remember the next day thinking like that. Yeah, a casual lover.
Yeah. It's like, but it's past, it's gone. It's really curious because that's why a lot of this is magic. I mean, think about it. You're invoking emotions. You're making a person feel a specific way at a given moment, which is the reason why you don't want to listen to certain music at certain times. You don't want to go there. I don't want to feel it, whether it's hard techno at 7 a.m. when you're waking up, or I don't know, bossa nova music when you feel a little bit. My son will do something really fucked up with me. He knows what songs make me cry.
The one that sings with you?
No. It's like these other songs. So like he discovered it. Like he put on a song in our living room, and I broke down in tears because I was just touched. You know, it touched me. What kind there's songs which just invoke so much nostalgia, so much. I just start crying.
Does that mean?
He saw it and he was just like, I think he was overwhelmed first because he was like, oh shit, he's really crying. It's like, not like I'm making it up. It's not like me telling Pranas, oh, music's so beautiful and wonderful and you can do this and like you can pick up girls if you sing them songs. Like, no, this is me actually like completely falling apart because he played a song. And then the next day he's playing it again. And like looking at me like,
do it again.
Yeah, no, it's like but that sense of mischief is great. You'd be surprised. You'd think that, well, my kids are musical because they've seen us be musical, right? It's like they didn't learn it. They hardly. It's like me. I don't know music. I'm illiterate, but I know music as a sensual lover, you know. And so they know. They're like, oh, this is nice, but it's worked. Like sometimes like, hey, we need to sing this song. And like I just wrote a song with my son. It's the most beautiful thing I've probably ever done in my life, but it was a struggle. Like. Initially, he's like, yeah, let's do it. And then he's like, meh.
It sounds better than it is.
And my ex-wife, she was like hesitant because that woman is a fantastic singer, like a really fantastic singer. And she was pushed by her family to perform all the time. She was like the family, what do you call it? The family attraction, the family pastime. It's like, oh, everyone get drunk. Hey, Erica, come out, sing us a song. And she didn't want the kids to go through that.
Does that happen to you?
Like, hey, Jurgis, sing us a song. Yeah. It does. As a policy, I accept all invitations, but I have to feel immediately that are we going there? Like, you want this? And I've become very attuned to the space because I try not, as they say, don't feed pearls to the pigs. You know, don't expend energy on something which is not going to receive it or is not ready to receive it. So I'll play like, oh, you want something novel? Just a little bit of novelty. Everybody claps up. But then the beauty is that sometimes I can develop into seriously magical moments. So I think part of the art and it's interesting because I'm a troubadour. I figured it out. A fucker with the guitar, which used to be the norm for probably thousands of years. Like somebody with an instrument playing music, reading the space, seeing, like understanding the acoustics. When is that moment when everybody just naturally shuts up and okay, now we can play, you know, like really, really feeling it and like, oh, you need this song right now. Oh, you need that song right now. Oh, it's a wedding. We're going to play these songs right now. Like a musical medicine man, you know, and also a conveyor of good and bad news, and also a provider of good comedy and banter through improvisation, you know, and it is such a complex profession because you need a lot of skill sets, which again, it's the small guitar I carry, with which I've learned this, because you'd never learn any of this in your bedroom rehearsing with a guitar.
Because they're so big, but you can travel with this so you can literally bring it out.
Anywhere. And that's the thing, you have to take it everywhere. You need to see what happens in a McDonald's when I pull this out. What happens when I do it in an airport? What happens when I do it in the middle of a street at 3 a.m. when there's drunk people? What happens when you do it in a boardroom when everyone's super serious? And so when you start knowing, it's like the reason why doctors study, you know, medicine for 15 years, you know.
The musical medicine man.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've never called myself that, but
I like that.
But it is medicine.
It fits you. Yeah,
it is that.
We were in Luxor the other night, going up to a hotel room, and there's all the security, and this guy comes out of the kitchen and he sees your guitar. He basically gestures, "Sing us a song." And so you did just that. You brought it out because there was an invitation, and it was ready because it's small and it's with you all of the time. And so we all broke out and danced by these elevators, and what followed was amazing. A really famous Egyptian opera singer comes out of the elevator and starts singing with you. And that's the reason why we're in this hotel room. That's the reason
why we're in this hotel room. That is why it's so bizarre that these things happen. Because he heard the song. He's like, "Oh, that's great." And he's like, "I have a hotel in Sharm El-Sheikh." But that's the beauty of it. I mean, it has opened a lot of doors for me. And so much so that it's even created a kind of like I've had to learn lessons around ego, because I started to think that people love me for what I do. And so this was like a postulate in my life. Like, even, you know, when you go to schools and you talk to kids about entrepreneurship or something, it's like, I'd always say, like, look, the only people who love you for who you are, if you're lucky, are your parents. Nobody else loves you for who you are. The only people who love you, everyone else loves you for what you do, what you provide, what you bring to the space. And so I kind of lived by that rule for a long time, and then that created a very deep void, because I was no longer content with just being. I felt that to deserve my space and my place at the table, I had to serve and to be in constant service. And that created a disbalance of its own, which, by the way, is something that many of us activists and people, you know, who serve causes selflessly encounter. Is because they're always giving. It's as if they felt that the world would not have a place for them if they didn't carve it out through service. You know this feeling. It's like they know nothing else.
It's draining. And I have so many friends which are broken by this. And I almost feel it like as a fellow kind of like being that, you know, you're bringing light and joy to other spaces, serving others. Like, I mean, to take them, embrace them, and like love them and say, "It's okay, man. You've done good. Relax." And I have many friends, which I won't name out, and some of which are, I mean, you're probably acquainted with their work, which you'd be surprised how vulnerable they are by the amount of love those people have given. Yeah. And when they receive love back, it's hard to, sometimes people struggle with accepting love because all they've ever done is like send it to the universe, but haven't like received it genuinely back. And it's hard. We're in this place where it's hard to accept that. I'm even like that.
Yeah, that's it. It's like, and then you can't have balance, because you can only serve others as well as you can serve yourself, and we forget that part of the equation. And it's funny because we're COP, and so, you know, there's also a big group of activists here which are all about, you know, the stress. We need to do something. We're trying this and that, and a lot of them have that same issue. And I think that's why we resonate. I think that's why, like, you know, people like you and me, like Hatchers as well, as you come together, because you understand that there's a lot to say about selflessness, you know, a lot. And we're missing it in the world. Yeah,
and when you get a bunch of people like that, it creates an energy that you can refuel yourself with.
But, I mean, you notice the warmth of the people in Egypt. I mean, there's the people who are always selling and hustling, but there's people who are just, like, truly joyous. They're like, "Oh, it's a human being. Let's smile."
Totally.
You're like, oh, it's like...
Especially the little kids.
The little kids, like, yay! Isn't it funny? The kids get it better than anyone else. They're like, yay!
The only word they know how to say, hello.
Yeah.
Hello. Like,
with the biggest smiles and the biggest eyes.
Yeah. Just full of curiosity. I can imagine them just seeing the boats sail by and just being like, oh my God, what a different world that is.
And the best thing we can do is provide it for them. I mean, I always have this issue, like when we were on the boat, the divide between the served, the one who serves, the served and the one who serves. There's probably a more elegant way of putting it, but like,
it's accurate.
That role has to invert, you know. And if you're in a place of privilege, it's not the money that creates the divide. It's that your experiences are completely different to that of someone else. It's like, and again, in development, it's not about, I really don't think it's about GDP, or it's about the fact that, you know, people have seen rich people eating at McDonald's, traveling to certain places, wearing certain clothes, and they're like, I want to experience that too. And sometimes you just need to experience it. You don't need to own it. You don't need to, you know, you don't need to own the Rolls Royce to know how nice it is to drive it or what it does to your ego. Maybe you do need to own it to know what it does to your ego. But in any case, this kind of like openness of experience, like, well, what does it feel like to sleep in the master's quarters? What does it feel like to sit at the main table?
Yeah.
And in Colombia, and I think in Egypt as well, many other places where there's such a strong legacy of colonialism, the best thing you can do is allow those people to experience what it feels like to have these nice, like going to Burning Man. Like going to Burning Man. Like, there's so many people who just can't go because of the money. They can't. Yeah. And it's like the most bizarre thing. I'm just gonna say, because it's really interesting. Like, so we went to Burning Man about 3 years ago with a whole bunch of rich Lithuanians. Well, I wasn't staying at the same camp, but we were going into the place together, and we stopped at a diner outside of Nevada. What's the city out there?
Reno.
We started outside of Reno, and there was this dude who was serving us. Right? He was serving us, and he's like, "Where are you guys going?" It's like, "We're going to Burning Man," and he's like, "I've dreamt all my life. I dreamt all my life of going. It's like maybe some year I'll get a ticket or something." Wow. Because you could tell he was like, he was working, he was hustling at the table, he was really struggling. He had that look of stress in his eyes, that look of, you know, where it's tough for a human being. And what really broke my heart was that the expression on my fellow Lithuanian faces, or their faces, was absolutely unempathetic. It's like, that's not my fucking problem. What kind of fucked up burner are you? If you don't understand that the best thing you can do at this moment is at least look into his eyes and say, "Man, I wish I could share that with you."
Yeah.
It was so telling, you know, like that experience. Like, I mean, if you're gonna eat the chocolate on your own and not share it, well, I mean, even that sounds fucked up, no?
Totally. and the other night you brought that experience to the crew on the boats that we were at. They came up twice, actually. There were 2 birthdays, and the entire crew came up, and we all like circled around the table and danced with them. But they had come up to us from where they were, and then they went back down to their usual kind of perch in the front, kind of on the lower deck where all their bedrooms are. And yeah, you did. You got us all into singing in tune. And we all marched down the stairs and climbed down and crossed the bridge between the boats, and it turned into a great party and connection between those cultures. I mean, Hatch has a lot of cultures, different cultures anyway, but it was like a drastic difference in cultures. It
was funny because then I was supposed to facilitate space afterwards. I was tired by then, but that moment was very special for me because it was kind of meeting them on their own level. It was like, let's invert the roles. Like, yeah. You came up to us, now we're going to come down to you. Yeah. Well, in that way, you did facilitate the space. Yeah. Yeah. No, it was lovely. And for me, it's also, yeah, I think people, there's one saying which is really beautiful. When you try to satisfy emotional needs through material means, you're going to pay through the nose. Totally. You know, and there's ways of just being just generous emotionally. Like we're here with Stephen Brooks, and he's a tremendously generous person with his emotions. I mean, I can be high voltage when it comes to like giving energy, but that guy's like, yesterday at the airport, 3 a.m, I'm tired. I don't want to be. I can't be nice. I physiologically can't be nice. And he's joking with everybody, with the security guards, and it's amazing. Like, because we were talking about security, like, and how it's stressful now with COP happening. And it was so nice traveling with him because he disarms everybody with a smile. Right? Totally. Yeah. He's like, hey. His smile is beautiful. Like you could be carrying 10 grams of pot, but we're not gonna search you. You're such a nice guy. I'm just bringing seeds back. On the boat, I'm curious to know, like, what was your favorite conversation that happened? There's so many interesting conversations that happen at Hatch. I think the most interesting conversation I had was a long conversation with several people. It was like the collective intelligence, right? Because we had a whole issue where, you remember the last couple of days leading up to the end of the trip, where we were supposed to sit down and start, deliver sessions. There's a moment where we had people speak up about gender, about race. And the curious thing is that conversation began before. Because during the first night of musical facilitation, I was holding space, and Yaro was singing, and at some point he sang really loud. Like he let it all out. He was like, "Whoa!" And he took the music in a different direction. And I said, "Oh, that's cultural. That's an example of cultural override."
Oh yeah, I remember. I was right next to him.
And it really affected him.
When you said that?
Yeah. It really affected him. And like we spoke about it later, and he said, I felt bad. He was just like, again, super good. It's like, I don't know. It really triggered me, and I don't know what I expect from telling you this, but it's great. He came out and said, yeah, maybe my choice of words was bad. And it's like, and then he said, yeah, it's like, I just don't know how big to make myself in a space, because sometimes I want to give so much, but then I need to make space for other human beings. And then, like, if anyone's met Yaro, I mean, he's my archetype of like a great leader, it's like, even physically, like the way he's emotionally balanced, the way that he's giving, the way he's infinitely kind, but also, he has also tremendous power, both physical, emotional, spiritual. It's like, for me, it's like, he's someone I admire and I look up to. And seeing him, like, us sharing this moment of like vulnerability is like, I'm struggling to know like how much space to take up gracefully. And the next day we met Annie on the boat, and for some reason everyone went to some other place. I stayed on the boat, so just the two of us.
You and Annie?
And she says, the theme for today will be the role of the king and the queen, the archetype, and how if you give too much, if you feel into it too strongly, then you become a tyrant. But if you don't fill your shoes, then you're abdicating. You're creating space where it's not needed. And that thing of like not assuming your responsibility, the thing of and it's like, it's beautiful because it's like a razor's edge, most likely. Like you become a tyrant, or you abdicate. And so for me, that whole loop of that conversation, like, as leaders, how much space do we take up? How do we take it up? And then having certain things unfold during the trip where you're really seeing it's like, should you be stronger? Should I not be stronger? And really learning how we're fine-tuning, because some of these conversations, I think the reason why the container could allow itself to diverge so strongly, to listen to other people's needs so generously, is because it's a high resonance space. But then the question is, like in a room that's super quiet, any sound is thunder. A mosquito when you're sleeping, it's super present in your mind. And so when you have these spaces, it's like a super clean wall. You see all the fingertips of your kids, passing by every time they put their fingers on the wall. It's this kind of phenomenon. So because it's a high resonance space, then you need a high resonance accountability and space holding. So for me, this is a conversation which is beautiful. What happens, I think, very often at Hatches is that you start one conversation with one person and you finish it with somebody else, and they flow. It's like, oh, this person said that, and they start to weave. And I do believe that that's one of the superpowers of any good community, is that there's like a collective intelligence. It's not telepathic, It's more like we're talking about the same things, and as we start passing around pieces of relevant information, we start creating a sense of collective coherence, and we fine-tune our values and our collective programming.
Jurgis.
No, it was magic. It was an interesting one.
Well, would you be interested in playing a song?
You know what? I can play you that song. I wrote with my song. As you sink into yourself, the silent darkness pulls you close. I see the weight of the world heavy upon your brow, and the senselessness of it all pulling you down. not quite sure what it's all about. Never really fitting in or really standing out. You didn't ask for eyes that see truth or ears that hear it, or a heart so pure that it can't help to feel it. But you were worth saving. You were worth saving. You were worth saving. Now for me to finish the song, Tate, you need to sing along. Saving. And you need to hold that part so I can you were worth saving. You were worth saving. If you only knew how much we are alike, you and me. You were worth saving. You were worth, like the phoenix must endure the flames alone to become what it's to be. You are worth saving.
Thank you. This is the Hatch Podcast. Jurgis, you beautiful man. Thank you. Jurgis builds community through music. Whether he's speaking publicly, playing and singing for a crowd, or curating a workshop for a business struggling to function as a cohesive team, Didziulis samples chords from culture, nature, and the melodies of life to give succor to emotional awareness, to at once feed the head and the heart. He's driven by a mission to elevate consciousness and conscientiousness. At the same time, when human skills, emotional intelligence, and culture of community are pivotal for humanity, says Didziulis, when it's more important than ever for our shared future and the people that wish to thrive in it. By bringing emotional intelligence to the fore through his work, Jurgis helps participants get out of the way of that which they seek to convey. To be emotionally aware is to listen, to heed the spoken and unspoken, to harmonize with those around you, neither amplifying nor detracting from the space that forms when power, control, and dominion are no longer the aim. Jurgis calls for high resonance accountability, a term that neatly encapsulates what should be the goal of all great leadership and great leaders: to create a container to hold the space for the creative innovation and prosperity that is possible when people are heard, respected, and valued, when we're all deemed worth saving. This episode was produced by Yara Craner, Susan Karstensen, and me, Tate Chamberlin. A shout out to our media and production team: Jessica Byerly, Allison Gregory, Kevin Hilton, Roy Chapman, Eli Kisko, Raymond Onsatagi, Sean Mackinson, Robert Edwards, and Mark Groner. A special thanks to Yaro Craner, Jared Silverman, Pete Strom, Josie Caton, Eitan Shapira, Cassidy Seckman, Bryant Stersala, Rachel Hicks, Katie Yam, and Lou Morris. With so much gratitude to the Hatch supporters, Steelcase, the Kauffman Foundation, the Gwydion Fund, Envision Equality, the Hatch volunteers, board of directors, Hatch guardians, and the community who help make this work and mission possible. To learn more about Hatch, visit hatchexperience.org. Building community could not happen without food. And with that, I'd like to thank Whistle Pig Korean, Red Tractor Pizza, and Zocalo Coffee House. Do you have an issue that's riddled by gridlock in your community? Shoot me an email at tate@iaminterchange.org. That's tate@iaminterchange.org. Remember, share airtime and don't ruin dinner.